I'm 61 years old, and for most of my life, I've learned how to exist without asking for too much. There's a certain kind of dignity in that, I used to think. A quiet strength in staying composed, in not making waves, in accepting what life gives you without complaint. I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. But I had grown used to a kind of stillness that slowly replaces dreams when no one is looking. Love, for me, had become something distant. Not painful, not even particularly sad, just far away. Like a story you once heard long ago. The kind you remember in fragments, but can't quite recall how it ended. My husband passed away 5 years ago. We had a steady marriage. Respectful. Predictable. We built a life. Together, raised a daughter. Paid our bills, shared meals at the same small kitchen table for decades. But if I'm being honest, we were companions more than anything else. There were no grand gestures, no stolen glances across a crowded room. No moments that made your heart skip in the way stories always promised. And after he was gone, I told myself that was enough. I settled into routines. Quiet mornings with coffee. Evenings spent in the soft glow of a lamp, watching old films I'd already seen a dozen times. Weekends tending to my small garden, where the roses bloomed faithfully each year, asking nothing of me except a little care. There was comfort in that predictability, and slowly, without even realizing it, I became invisible. Not in a tragic way. No one ignored me out of cruelty. It was softer than that, subtler. People simply stopped seeing me. At work, I was dependable, efficient, the backbone of the office, as my boss liked to say. But I wasn't someone anyone looked at twice. I had accepted that, until the night everything shifted. It had been raining that evening. Not a storm, not dramatic, just a steady, gentle rain that softened the world, turning the city into something quieter, almost reflective. I stayed late at the office, going over reports my team had mishandled earlier that week. Numbers had always made sense to me. They followed rules. They didn't surprise you. People, on the other hand. Well, my boss, Greg Bennett, had already left for a dinner meeting. But he'd called before heading out. "Diane," he'd said, his voice slightly rushed. "I heard you're still there. My son Jason is in the area. I'll have him swing by and give you a ride home." I had hesitated. "Oh, that's really not necessary." "Nonsense," he cut in. "It's pouring out. He'll be there in 15. And just like that, the decision was made for me. I didn't like inconveniencing people, especially not someone like Jason, his son. Young, busy, with a life full of movement and possibility. I had only seen him a handful of times over the years. Office parties, holiday mixers, always polite, always distant. He belonged to a different world than mine. But when I stepped outside the building, umbrella straining against the wind, I saw his black SUV waiting right at the curb. Before I could even approach, the driver's door opened and he stepped out. "Hey, Miss Collier," he called, jogging toward me through the rain. He looked exactly as I remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with that effortless kind of confidence youth carries so easily. His hoodie was already damp at the shoulders, but he didn't seem to mind. "Hop in," he said with a warm grin. "I've got the heat blasting." I gave a small, polite smile. "Please just call me Diane." He nodded. "Okay, Diane." There was something about the way he said my name, simple, natural, not overly familiar, but not distant either. I slid into the passenger seat, shaking a bit of rain from my coat. The interior was warm, almost instantly comforting. It smelled faintly of leather and something citrusy, clean, subtle. He got back in, started the engine, and pulled smoothly into the street. "I hope this isn't too much trouble," I said, folding my hands neatly in my lap. He glanced at me briefly, then back at the road. "Not at all," he said. "Honestly, I kind of needed the drive." There was something in his tone I couldn't quite place. Not sadness exactly, but not lightness either. We drove in silence for a while. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically, back and forth, like a quiet metronome marking time. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, stretching into long golden streaks. It felt calm, unusually calm. "You've worked with my dad a long time, right?" he asked suddenly. "Almost 20 years, I replied. He nodded slowly. "He talks about you a lot." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Oh, yeah," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Says you're the reason everything doesn't fall apart." I let out a soft laugh. "Well, someone has to keep things running." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something shifted in the air then, subtle but undeniable. "He doesn't really know me, Jason said after a moment. The words seemed to come out of nowhere. I turned slightly toward him. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowed the car, then pulled into a small parking area beside a quiet park. The rain had softened to a light drizzle now, barely more than a mist. The engine idled. The world outside felt still. I'm sorry, he said, running a hand through his hair. I know this is kind of strange. My chest tightened slightly. It's all right, I said carefully. He let out a breath, staring at the dashboard for a moment before speaking again. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, he admitted. But now that we're here, I don't think I can keep pretending. My heart began to beat a little faster. I didn't know what I expected him to say. Maybe something about his father. A disagreement. A personal struggle. Something logical. Something explainable. But what came next? I've thought about you for a long time. The words landed softly, but they hit like a storm. I blinked, certain I had misunderstood. I know that probably sounds crazy, he continued quickly. You're older. You work with my dad, I get it. I know how it looks. I couldn't speak. My mind was trying to catch up, to rearrange reality into something that made sense. But I've noticed you, he said, his voice quieter now. At those events, the way you carry yourself, like you're made of something, steady, something real. I felt something twist deep in my chest. I don't expect anything, he added. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it out loud. Silence filled the car. Not awkward, not heavy, just full. You matter, he said finally. And you deserve to hear that from someone who sees it. I stared straight ahead, unable to move. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. No pressure, no expectation, no demand. Just truth. And somehow, that made it even more overwhelming. Because it had been so long. So long since anyone had looked at me like that. Seen me like that. Really seen me. I slowly turned my head, meeting his gaze. There was no arrogance there. No assumption. Just openness. Vulnerability. And that was what broke something inside me. Not in a painful way, but in a way that made me realize how long it had been closed. He drove me home after that. Quietly. Respectfully. He didn't bring it up again. Didn't push. Didn't linger. When I stepped out of the car, he simply nodded and said, "Good night, Diane." And then he was gone. But I wasn't the same. I stood in my foyer for a long time after the door closed behind me. My coat still on, my hands still slightly cold. The house looked exactly as it always had. Familiar, comfortable, unchanged. But something inside me had shifted. Something I couldn't name, something I couldn't undo. And as I stood there in the quiet, his words echoed in my mind like a song I hadn't heard in years. You matter. You deserve to be seen. That night I didn't sleep, because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't invisible anymore. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had stepped into someone else's life. Everything looked the same. The soft morning light filtering through the curtains. The faint hum of the kettle as it heated on the stove. Maple weaving between my legs, impatient for her breakfast. My favorite mug waiting exactly where I had left it the night before. But none of it felt the same. I moved through my routine like I always did, methodical, quiet, practiced. Pouring coffee, feeding Maple, opening the curtains to let the pale winter sun spill into the room. But there was a strange hesitation in my movements, as if I were slightly out of sync with myself. My thoughts kept drifting, back to the car, back to his voice. You matter. I paused in the middle of stirring my coffee, the spoon resting against the ceramic with a soft clink. When was the last time anyone had said something like that to me? Not politely, not out of obligation, but meant it? I couldn't remember, and that realization unsettled me more than his confession itself. At work, I tried to be normal. I really did. I arrived on time, organized my desk, answered emails with my usual efficiency, reviewed reports, corrected mistakes, offered quiet guidance where needed. But beneath it all, there was a tension in me, a kind of awareness I couldn't shake. Every sound felt sharper. Every glance felt heavier. I found myself avoiding Greg entirely. It wasn't rational. He had no idea what had happened. There was no reason for guilt, and yet I felt exposed. As if something private had been written across my face for everyone to see. I kept my head down, focused, contained. That was what I had always been good at. But this was different, because no matter how much I tried to push it aside, Jason's words had already taken root. By midweek, I had almost convinced myself I could return to normal. Almost. Then my phone buzzed. A simple message. Jason, Hope I didn't make things weird. I'm really sorry if I crossed a line. I stared at the screen for a long time. 5 minutes, maybe more. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend it hadn't happened, to retreat back into the safe, familiar version of my life where nothing unexpected ever reached me. But another part of me, a quieter, braver part, didn't want to lose what that moment had given me. Even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Finally I typed, "Me, you didn't. Thank you for trusting me with that. I'm still thinking." I read the message 3 times before sending it. It felt careful, honest, safe. I didn't expect a reply. But it came anyway. "Jason, take your time. I just wanted you to know." That was it. No pressure. No follow-up. Just space. And somehow that made it harder to forget. That evening, I sat outside on my small porch, wrapped in a blanket. The air was cool, the kind that seeps into your bones if you sit still too long. The trees rustled softly overhead, their branches bare against the fading light. I held a cup of tea in my hands, but I hadn't taken a single sip. I was thinking about love, about time, about the quiet ways life changes you without asking permission. When you reach your 60s, people start treating you differently. Not unkindly, just distantly. You become someone who has lived, not someone who is still living. The world assumes your story has already been written, that the important chapters are behind you. And eventually, you start believing that too. I had, until now, because Jason hadn't looked at me like I was finished. He hadn't seen me as someone fading into the background. He had seen something, alive, and that terrified me. Because if he was right, then what else had I been wrong about? A few days later, the office was in quiet chaos. Greg's assistant had called in sick, leaving us scrambling to manage a packed schedule. Meetings were overlapping, calls were being missed, papers were being misplaced. It was the kind of situation I usually thrived in. Order in the middle of disorder. I volunteered to deliver some paperwork across town, partly to help, partly to escape the restless energy building inside me. But when I stepped outside, there he was, leaning casually against his SUV, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, like he had been there all along. "Hey, Diane," he said, straightening slightly as he saw me. My heart skipped, just once, just enough to notice. "Dad said you might need a driver," he added, his tone lighter this time, careful. I hesitated, only for a moment. Then I nodded. "All right." He opened the passenger door for me, just like before. And just like before, I got in. The drive was quieter this time. No rain, no radio. Just the soft hum of the engine and the passing blur of the city outside. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt intentional. Like both of us were aware of something unspoken, and neither of us wanted to rush it. When we reached the building, I turned to him before opening the door. "You really meant everything you said that night?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He didn't hesitate. Every word. His gaze didn't waver, not even for a second. I swallowed. "That's a lot for me to process. I know." "You're young," I added, my voice quieter now. "And I'm—" "Don't," he interrupted gently. I paused. "Don't define yourself like that," he said. "You're not just your age." I looked at him, unsure. "You're Diane," he continued. "You're warm, you're thoughtful, and when you laugh, it changes the whole room." My chest tightened. No one had ever said something like that to me before. Not like this. Not without expectation. Not without an agenda. It slipped past my defenses before I could stop it. Right into something I had buried years ago. I looked away, gathering myself. "I should go," I murmured, reaching for the folder. Our fingers brushed as he took it. Just for a second, but it was enough. A small, quiet spark. He didn't react, didn't hold on longer than necessary. Just nodded. "I'll be here when you're done." And he was... The ride back felt even quieter, but softer. Like something between us had shifted. Not dramatically. Not dangerously, but enough to be felt. When we reached the office, I opened the door, then paused. "You did remind me," I said quietly. He looked at me. Of something I didn't realize I was missing. A small smile touched his lips. Not triumphant, not hopeful, just understanding. "I'm glad," he said. I stepped out into the cold air, my heart beating faster than it should have. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just existing, I was feeling again. The weekend arrived quietly, but inside me, nothing was quiet anymore. I tried to distract myself. Laundry, cleaning, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging, even pruning the rose bush in my backyard, though I knew it was too late in the season. Anything to keep my hands busy. My mind, however, refused to cooperate, because no matter what I did, I kept thinking about him, not just what he said, but how he made me feel, seen, not as a role, not as a responsibility, but as a person, a woman. And that realization, it unsettled me in ways I wasn't prepared for, because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where it could lead, or where it shouldn't. That evening, I sat in my living room. A book rested open in my lap, unread. The fireplace flickered softly beside me, casting warm shadows across the walls. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down. "Jason, are you home? Would it be okay if I stopped by?" My breath caught. I read the message twice, 3 times. I knew what this meant, or at least, what it could mean. This wasn't a passing moment anymore. This was a choice, and I stood right at the edge of it. If I said no, things might go back to normal, safe, predictable, quiet. If I said yes, I didn't know what would happen. But I knew it wouldn't be the same. My heart beat steadily in my chest, louder than usual, stronger. And before I could overthink it, I typed, "Me, yes, just for a little while." 20 minutes later, his SUV pulled into my driveway. I was already standing by the door, waiting. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like something was about to begin. When I opened the door, the cool evening air slipped inside with him. Jason stood there for a moment, just on the threshold, like he understood that stepping into my home meant stepping into something more than just a conversation. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I stepped aside and he walked in. For a brief second, I watched him take in the space around him, the soft lighting, the framed photographs, the quiet order of a life built slowly over decades. "It's exactly how I imagined it," he said. I gave a small smile. "And how is that?" "Warm," he answered simply. That word lingered, because no one had ever described my life like that before. We settled in the living room. I offered him tea. He accepted. It felt strange, almost surreal, moving through such ordinary gestures while something so unfamiliar hovered just beneath the surface. I sat in my armchair. He took the edge of the couch. Not too close, not distant either. There was space between us, but it wasn't empty. It was waiting. "I didn't come here to push anything," he said after a moment. "I just wanted to talk, without the car, without the noise." I nodded, wrapping my hands around the mug. "I don't even know what to say," I admitted. "That's okay." Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt honest. "I've spent a long time believing a part of my life was over," I said finally. "The part where someone looks at me the way you did." Jason leaned forward slightly, his expression soft. "It's not over." I shook my head faintly. "You don't understand. At my age, I do understand," he said gently but firmly. "Maybe not your years, but I understand what it means to feel unseen." That made me pause. "There's nothing about you that feels finished," he continued. "You just stopped letting people look close enough to notice." His words landed deeper than I expected. Because there was truth in them, I had closed myself off. Not all at once, but slowly, carefully, piece by piece, until one day there was nothing left exposed. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think I forgot I was allowed to want anything more." "You are," he said without hesitation. The simplicity of it broke something inside me, because I had spent so many years convincing myself otherwise. The tears came quietly. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, just a few that slipped free before I could stop them. I turned slightly embarrassed, but he didn't move. Didn't rush to comfort me, didn't try to fix it. He just let me feel it. And somehow, that meant more. After a moment, I stood and walked toward the window. The rain had started again, light, steady, familiar. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Part of me wants to close this door," I said. "To thank you for reminding me I still have a heart. And then go back to my life." I felt him stand behind me, but he didn't come closer. "And the other part?" he asked gently. I closed my eyes for a second. "The other part?" I exhaled slowly. "Wants to know what it feels like to be wanted. To be seen, even if it's just for a moment." The room felt impossibly still. "Then let's start there," he said. No expectations, no pressure, just honesty. I turned to face him. There was no urgency in his expression, no demand, just quiet certainty. I took a step toward him, then another, until we stood close enough to feel each other's presence, but not touching. I don't know where this leads, I said. You don't have to, he replied. You just have to let it exist. And for the first time in years, I did. Not something overwhelming, not reckless, just a soft opening, a willingness, a quiet yes. The days that followed didn't explode into something dramatic. There were no grand declarations, no sudden changes. Instead, things unfolded slowly, naturally, like something that had been waiting for permission. Jason didn't overwhelm me with attention. He didn't try to take over my time or my life. He just showed up. A simple good morning text. A photo of a book he thought I might like. Short phone calls in the evening. Never too long, never forced. And I found myself looking forward to those small moments. Not because they were exciting, but because they were real. He listened, truly listened, not to respond, not to impress, but to understand, and in doing so, he made space for parts of me I had forgotten existed. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found him waiting again outside, leaning against his SUV, just like before. You look tired, he said as I approached. I am, I admitted. Then, after a small pause, I added, but seeing you helps. Something in his expression softened. He opened the door for me, and we drove in comfortable silence. No music, no pressure to fill the space, just presence. When we reached my house, he turned off the engine but didn't move. Can I ask you something? He said. I nodded. What are you most afraid of right now? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly, that I'll lose myself. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? That I'll forget who I am, I said. That I'll start hoping for something I'm not supposed to want. He reached over slowly, carefully, and took my hand. His touch was warm, steady. You don't have to lose yourself, he said quietly, and you're allowed to want whatever you want. I looked down at our hands, at the simple, gentle connection between us. I don't know what this is, I whispered. He smiled softly. It doesn't need a name yet. That answer felt right, because whatever this was, it wasn't something I had known before. That night he came inside again. We sat at the kitchen table, drank tea, talked, really talked, about his childhood, about his mother, how losing her changed him, about my marriage, the parts I never said out loud, the loneliness I had learned to live with. We didn't rush through those conversations. We handled them carefully, like something fragile, something meaningful. Hours passed without us noticing. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was filling silence. I felt like I was sharing space. Eventually, he stood near the door, preparing to leave. Neither of us spoke right away, because something had shifted again. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way that felt permanent. I don't want to complicate your life, he said finally. I looked at him. You didn't, I replied softly. You clarified it. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. Good night, Diane. Good night, Jason. He stepped outside, and just like the first night, I stood there for a moment after the door closed. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, alive. In the days that followed, I thought a lot about everything that had happened, about what it meant, about what it could mean, and more importantly, about what I wanted. Not what was expected, not what was safe, but what was true. I realized something then. This wasn't just about Jason. It wasn't just about being seen by someone else. It was about seeing myself again, about recognizing that I wasn't finished, that I wasn't invisible, that I still had the capacity to feel, to want, to choose. And that was the part that mattered most. So here is the truth, the mistake I almost made. I almost walked away. I almost convinced myself that this was inappropriate, unrealistic, something that didn't belong in my life. I almost chose safety over possibility, silence over truth, but I didn't. Not because I knew where it would lead, but because I finally understood something I wish I had realized years ago. It's never too late to feel something real, to be seen, to open a door you thought was closed forever. Jason didn't save me. That's not what this was. He reminded me of who I was, of what I deserved. And in the end, the choice wasn't about him. It was about me, choosing to live again. Not loudly, not recklessly, but honestly. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do.